Have you ever felt like the world is just too loud? Like there's always noise, pressure to socialize and fill every gap with something. Well, in Nordic countries, life tends to move a little differently. It's a bit simpler, quieter, and there's more space to just be without the stress of trying to be socially perfect. So in this video, I will share 7 lessons from our lifestyle. Some practical ideas, habits, and mindsets that can help you feel more at ease, whether you are an introvert or just someone craving a bit more calm. Let's get into it. The first lesson is that being an introvert is not a bad thing. I think there's so much good about being an introvert, especially when it's combined a few things I'll mention in this video. But first, let's clear up something that often gets mixed up. Introversion doesn't mean shyness. A lot of people think that if you're quiet, you must be shy, or that you are unfriendly or distant or even bored. But that is not true. Being quiet often just means that you are observing, you are thinking, or simply comfortable in the moment without needing to fill the space with words. In Nordic countries like Finland, this difference is pretty clear. People aren't big on small talk, but that doesn't automatically mean that they are shy or unfriendly or any of those things. It's just that constant chatter isn't necessary. So something I have learned from my culture is to not try to force yourself to be more outgoing if that is not who you are. There's nothing wrong with being quiet or more reserved. You don't need to fix yourself to fit into social situations. In fact, introverts often have quite strong social skills. They're just different from the energetic kind that we usually think of. Introverts are usually very good listeners, deeply empathetic, and really good at picking up on things that usually others, especially extroverts, miss. I really think that the ability to connect on a deeper level, to really understand and support people, is a gift, not a weakness. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room to be heard or to matter. So instead of trying to change who you are, focus on embracing it. Number 2, the power of being alone. One thing that really stands out in Nordic culture is how being alone doesn't equal being lonely. It's not seen as strange or sad to do things on your own. It's just part of everyday life here. You will see people sitting alone eating lunch or reading a book without feeling the need to pretend that they are waiting for someone. And for us, alone time isn't something you squeeze in between social plans like it's some kind of afterthought. It's actually prioritized. People often plan out time just for themselves because it's how they recharge. And there are these fantastic illustrations called Finnish Nightmares by a graphic designer called Karoliina Korhonen, and they perfectly capture those little moments that many introverts and Finns relate to, like feeling overwhelmed in a busy shop surrounded by people, thinking I would rather be anywhere else. I'll be sharing more of these throughout the video. Another thing that is really important is protecting your energy. In Nordic culture, people are pretty good at setting boundaries without over-explaining. If something or someone is draining for you, it's okay to step back. You don't need a dramatic excuse for that. Actually, having time to yourself is often seen as a sign that you are taking care of your well-being. Just recognizing what exhausts you and quietly adjusting your boundaries is enough. It's not about being rude, it's about maintaining your well-being. You are allowed to say no, cancel plans, or simply not engage with something when you are feeling drained. That said, I think that there is a fine line between enjoying solitude and feeling isolated, and it is very important to notice when you are crossing this line. Because while solitude is needed sometimes, too much isolation can make you feel disconnected, and I think many Nordic people suffer from this. So the key is balance. It's okay to enjoy your own company, but it is also healthy to have meaningful connections. The third lesson is silence isn't a problem to fix. In Nordic culture, silence is seen as natural, not something to avoid. Of course, there can still be awkward moments when you are not sure what to say, but you know that you probably should say something. I think that happens everywhere, but in general, there's no unspoken rule that you always have to say something or fill every gap with small talk. I remember seeing an advertisement on a bus here in my city about 15 years ago. It said something like, "Nothing to say to the person next to you. Maybe you could talk about these pastries." And I remember thinking, but why? Why do we need to talk about anything? Can we just stay quiet? And that kind of sums up the Nordic mindset around silence. And actually one of our nightmares is the full bus, so having to sit next to someone. And also when people call you loudly in public places. I have always hated that when my parents or something like that start to shout me in a store, "Hey, Seve, hey." It's annoying. So the problem isn't really the silence itself, it's how we think about silence that makes it feel awkward or uncomfortable. If you believe silence is a sign that something is wrong, of course it will feel tense. But if you start seeing silence as normal, even as something that gives you space to think and breathe, everything gets easier. You don't have to fix this, because I don't think that there's anything broken. Sometimes silence speaks even louder than words. It can show understanding, respect, or even emotions without needing to explain everything or anything. In Nordic culture, silence in many ways is actually communication. Being silent together in a sauna or walking in nature can sometimes make you feel even more connected than forced small talk, because you are sharing space without the pressure to say anything or perform socially. You are just being both there. For say less, mean more. In Nordic culture, especially in Finland, there is a strong belief in saying what you mean and meaning what you say. Conversations don't have to be long or filled with unnecessary details to be very meaningful. The fewer the words, the better, as long as they are genuine. Finnish people, for example, often avoid stating the obvious. If something seems clear, we would rather stay quiet than point it out. However, I know sometimes this can be a bad thing, because what is obvious to you might not be obvious to everyone. But when we do speak, there's an emphasis on honesty and being straightforward. If someone says something, they really mean it. There's no hidden messages or reading between the lines. And while emotions might not always be openly expressed, here, when they are genuine. It's like that rare Finnish smile. It might not show up often, but when it does, it is real. I probably smile more than the average Finnish person or Nordic person, so don't get confused with this. And when it comes to listening, now that I think of it, here it's actually considered rude to jump in while someone is still talking. It's not just about interrupting. I don't think that that is a good thing to do either, but it can come across as if you weren't really listening at all, just waiting for your turn to speak. And it gives the impression that you are more focused on what you want to say rather than truly hearing what the other person is trying to express. That's why people here tend to have the pause before responding, and why it's really good to listen, not to just respond, but to learn and really understand the other person. It makes conversations feel way more genuine, because it's not about who speaks the most, but about creating space for real connection. 5. Keeping social life simple. Here, it's not about how many people you know or how often you meet. It's about the quality of those connections. You don't need to text every week or catch up constantly to maintain a strong relationship. You can even stay months without seeing each other. What matters is being fully present when you are together. Our relationships and friendships often develop quite slowly, and there's no pressure to click instantly. They are built gradually through small, consistent actions, like showing up when it matters, rather than big or dramatic gestures or sacrifices. And once trust is established, it tends to be really strong and lasting. When it comes to social gatherings, quiet get-togethers are the norm. Social events are usually small, relaxed, and calm, and even among young people, like young adults or teenagers, it's completely normal to hang out at someone's home instead of going out. In fact, many times, even if the original plan was to head out later, we just decide to stay in because it feels more comfortable. I think we prefer these small groups or one-on-one meetups because, yes, most of us are more introverted, but also they allow for more deeper and more meaningful conversations without the noise or distraction of a large crowd. 6. Set social boundaries without guilt. One really nice thing about Nordic culture is how setting social boundaries is completely normal. There's no pressure to constantly be available and overly social. For example, if you are at a larger formal gathering, it's totally fine to leave without a big goodbye. You don't have to make these rounds like in some cultures where you are expected to say goodbye to every single person. In Italy, at least, this is the norm. And while there's nothing wrong with that, I have enjoyed that it gives good balance to my life. I know that I would feel quite exhausted if I had to do that every time I'm like participating in some event. Here you usually just say goodbye to the host and whoever you want to say bye to. You can also leave early without feeling like you have broken some rule. Just saying something like, thanks for having me, I'm going now, is many times enough. You don't need to come up with all these emergency excuses or anything like that. Then we have unspoken rules that on public transport, people leave an empty seat between themselves and others if possible. No one feels the need to ask, is this seat taken? Because it is just understood that space is preferred when available. If there's nobody sitting there and there's no space anywhere else where you could sit alone, well, then you just have to sit there and that's it. It's another nightmare if actually someone invades this space when they didn't have to. And another funny one about leaving the space is when you are walking outside after it has been snowing and there's only kind of one path. So you both walk in the snow on the sides. Nobody can take the middle path. These are so accurate. Number 7, habits that need rethinking. While the Nordic approach to social life has its strengths, there are some habits that might need a little bit of rethinking. These aren't necessarily bad, but they can sometimes hold people back from living their life to the fullest. The first one is, say it if it is important. Silence can be comfortable, but sometimes silence isn't the best option. Like in this case here in the Finnish nightmares when somebody's blocking your way. Avoiding conflict might feel easier in the moment, but I think it just leads to misunderstandings or resentment, or at least can lead to in the long term. The second one is being too independent. Independence is really big part of Nordic culture, and while that is often a good thing, being too independent can create unnecessary distance. It's okay to ask for help when you need it. You don't have to do everything always alone. And simple gestures like checking in with a friend or asking how are you doing can go a long way and show that you actually care about them. The third thing I would like to see is people carrying these values online as well. We are polite and respectful in person, but sometimes those values don't fully carry over to online spaces. It's very easy to be rude when you are not face to face with someone, but that doesn't make it right. The same respect for personal space, thoughtful communication and listening that applies in real life should apply online too. Also, you don't need to fill every online space with your opinion. It's okay to scroll past without commenting on everything. 4. Don't force calmness or hide emotions. There's often an expectation to stay calm and collected even when emotions are bubbling under the surface. And while being composed can be helpful, just suffocating your emotions isn't always healthy. It's okay to feel things deeply, to show frustration, sadness, or excitement without worrying that you have to always keep it together. In the end, it's about balancing simplicity and personal space while staying open to what life has to offer. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to stay kind and meaningful in your own beautiful journey. See you in the next one.